Welcome to this episode of Ponderings and Musings of an Ordinary Man. I'm your host, Greg Jacobs. My name is Greg Jacobs. I am the host of the Ponderings and Musings of an Ordinary Man podcast. Appreciate you listening today. I'm here with my guest, Brett Hartman. Really excited about this guest. He's a very, very close friend of mine. I've gotten to know him over the last, 4 years, Brett. Is that accurate? Does that sound right?
That sounds right. Sounds right.
So, Brett, welcome. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate you having me on. I'm doing great. Doing great.
Good.
Excited for this.
Well, I am excited. You're my first guest on this new podcast, and the reason that I formulated this podcast, a lot of you might remember Paul Harvey, and that's the rest of the story. Back in the '80s, might have even been before, but that was kind of a real inspiration for me. I really enjoyed listening to those stories. And it's really just kind of stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. When I sat down and thought about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, I got to thinking about who do I know in my contact list that really kind of epitomizes that. Somebody that's kind of branching out from the ordinary, going out into uncharted waters, taking a leap of faith, whatever it might be. And Brett kind of epitomizes that for me. I've gotten to know him locally. He lives down the road from me, but he also painted my house recently. But how we got to know each other is we have both actually lost children. And I will say that I have a separate podcast, Turning Grief into Growth, a journey of transformation. And that I've pretty much kind of reserved for a lot of the grief oriented guests and conversations. Brett would double for this one and for that one. But we are going to talk a little bit about his grief journey in losing his daughter, Eva. Oh, goodness, it's over 7 years now. But I really wanted to have Brett on because 22 years ago, he was training to be a pilot, and his plane crashed in outside Roswell, New Mexico, and he survived. And not only did he survive, but he learned to overcome the use of his arm. So we joke around just because it's
The
part of his
loss.
healing. The loss, not the use, the loss of his arm. Yeah.
The
Um,
loss of the use of my arm.
Yep,
Yes.
that too. But we kind of joke around about being a one-arm painter
Yeah.
because he is, and he has managed to live life to the fullest, even without the use and the loss of that limb. So I'm going to let him tell his story. So Brett, kind of take us back to 22, 23 years ago, whenever you were training to be a pilot and what that looked like and kind of leading up to the actual accident.
Yeah, sure thing. So I had way back in the day, I was like 15, 16 years old, and I had this major passion to be a pilot. I In my mind, I was thinking the highest, the fastest airplanes, Tom Cruise kind of Top Gun kind of thing. That was my dream as a kid. That's what I wanted to do. I got into flying real young, was flying at 16 and got my pilot's license when I was 17. I took a year off because it was very expensive. And then I went right into flying when I got in college. And
So, how old are you right now?
I am 41.
41. Okay. So it was 22 years ago that the accident happened, but you got in, prior to that, obviously, as far as getting your pilot's license and things like
I
that.
did. I did.
So
So
what
anyway,
what took you
go
out to
ahead.
New Mexico?
So in my first semester there in school, I got an invitation because I had come to school with my private pilot's license already. Uh, I got an invitation to go on a mountain flying trip, which teaches about the dangers and all the different stuff necessary for high altitude flying, flying up in the mountains, and things like that. So that's the reason I was offered in my first semester to go, and that's what we did.
Now, did you ever have to fly with oxygen with high altitudes or?
So no, we didn't. We didn't. We were in there was on that trip there was three Cessna 172s. We were about the day of the crash, we left and we were flying right near Cloudcroft, New Mexico, kind of coming over a mountain pass, and the ground elevation out there is about like 8,600 to 9,000 feet
Hmm.
above sea level. So the plane, it was a hot day, so the plane thought it was even higher, basically. That low density altitude is what they call it. And we basically just got in that thin air and got right over the mountains. And we turned the corner and kind of just got funneled in to rising terrain.
Hmm.
And I mean there was a bunch of things that went wrong. But obviously I could not remember anything once regaining consciousness.
So really, it was kind of a matter of false readings on the gauges. Am I hearing that correctly? As far as some of the terrain was a little different as far as altitude, or
Some of that, some of it was planning. We should have entered the mountains a little at a higher altitude, things like that.
a lot of times people say hindsight's 2020, and it's easy and flippant. But in your case, I mean, it was life altering, right?
It was life altering. I do remember. So this would have been a month later. I was in the hospital for about a month. I had multiple broken bones. I had a traumatic brain injury. I was taken out of the game for a long time. I had um real loopy and kind of just almost unconscious for almost a month in a coma. And then I was in physical therapy for 2 years following that.
Wow.
So almost 5 days a week for 2 years.
So it wasn't just your arm. It was your pretty much your whole body. You had the traumatic brain injury. There was just a lot of things with that. I'm going to share my screen for those that are listening on Spotify or on Apple Podcast or other podcasting platforms. You won't be able to see this picture, but if you are watching on YouTube, I just want to be able to share this picture of the plane that Brett was flying as it went down. You could see where it's just mangled beyond belief, just kind of wrapped around one of these trees. There's a couple of people up there in the picture looking at it. Keep in mind, this is 2003. Wasn't exactly digital photography, real rampant at that time. So kind of hard to see some of the resolution on it, but you can get the gist of it's an absolute miracle that Brett survived that accident. And Brett, I'm going to stop sharing just so I could see you on the screen. But correct me if I'm wrong. You were on your way to Roswell, New Mexico at the time. Is that correct?
Yes, we left Las Cruces, that's where I took over and took the pilot's seat. And there was three of us in the airplane, but we were going from Las Cruces to Roswell and crossing the mountains right near Cloudcroft.
Now, are you certain that it wasn't the aliens in Area 51 that brought you down?
You know, that the question's always out there. It's always out there.
Do you know the truth? That's the question. I was a
We'll
huge
never
X-File
know.
fan. I
So
could see
that's
Mulder
funny.
and Scully from X-Files right now, just kind of investigating your plain sight just to see
Yeah.
what happened if all the gauges went haywire and everything else. So, I'm not making light of the accident, but
No, not
that's
at
all
all.
part of your journey. We've shared a lot of conversations about this. So you were in the hospital for how long again? I know you said 2 years of physical therapy, but how long in the
So two
hospital?
years of physical therapy, but initially I was in the hospital for 3 to 4 weeks in Texas. I got airlifted to Texas, and then I got airlifted from there to Louisville, Kentucky, which is close to where I live now, and was in a brain injury rehab unit there for a while. And then after that, I spent the 2 years in physical therapy after that.
Now, were you married to your wife, Callie, at the time?
I was not. I
Okay,
was not. So we started dating. I'm gonna get myself in trouble here. We started dating about 2 years later.
gotcha.
I was still, go ahead.
I had it engraved on the inside of my wedding band as far as the date of my anniversary.
Right.
So there's all these
Okay.
guys listening who are like, no, I can relate with getting in trouble. Sometimes I forget my dates. So it was
Yeah.
your parents that really went down and stayed with you in Texas. You come from a big family, a lot of brothers and sisters and things. So what was that like for you?
Yeah, so my parents and some siblings went with them, and they stayed with me in the hospital and everything, and honestly I can remember like hardly nothing
Hmm.
about that. My memory of flying was gone. I know that happens with traumatic brain injuries and everything, but I do remember upon being brought home. So this is a month, more than a month after the accident. I remember laying there asking somebody like, "What in the world just happened to me?" I had no clue. I
Yeah.
I couldn't walk. My arm didn't work. But I had no clue. Literally, like I had lived the whole experience and it was gone out of my brain.
Was the impression given by the medical experts to your parents and your siblings that we're not sure if Brett's going to make it, if he's going to pull through? Was it assumed that no, he's going to be fine? It's just going to be a long road ahead of him. What was kind of the consensus there at the time when you were in the hospital in Texas?
So initially it was real touch and go. The possibility of death and that being it was back and forth, but that was a real possibility for probably almost 2 weeks with brain swelling and all that stuff going on. So that was a very real fear for my parents. That was, God bless them. That was real tough for them.
Hmm.
I couldn't remember anything about that. So
Yeah.
it was the survive. It always is. It's the survivors that deal with the real hardship at that point.
So fast forward 2 years of physical therapy. How often did you do physical therapy? Was that back in Kentucky at that point? Were you living
Yeah.
in
So that was
Minnesota at that point?
that was back in. I did do a little stint in Kansas where I was in college and did some physical therapy out there, but for the most part, it was 5 days a week here at home in Shelbyville, Kentucky. Every day physical therapy.
What was your mental health like during that time? I mean, it had to have been very discouraging. You had already lost the use of your limb at that point. You were still probably dealing with maybe some, brain swelling, I guess, or just, other bodily issues to get whole again, knowing you wouldn't permanently get whole. There would be this gap as far as usage in one of your limbs. But what was that like for you?
Yeah, so it took a long time. It took years to fully wrap my head around the fact that, oh, I'm gonna be like this maybe for the rest of my life. That took years at least probably 2 years to get my head around that, and then sort of a slide into depression. That just kept happening. That was even though I kind of saw it happening, I could do nothing to stop it. It went all the way down to suicide was something I wanted.
Hmm.
I wanted to be over. I had lost my career path. I had lost my friends because I had tons of nice friends and family and everything, but there's something that happens when everybody around you moves on with their life and and you're stuck there with the pain both mentally and physically and just the emotional trauma and everything. And I got to the point that I wanted out bad.
Had you, can you hear me?
There you are, there you are.
Wow. I don't know what just happened. My computer went, can you hear me or see me or
Okay.
can you hear me?
Are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you. I think we're going to have to stop it and start it over and splice it together. Okay. Um, all right, I'm back. So I don't know what happened there. We'll splice that in. I'm going to start back over. Three, two, one. So Brett, let me ask you something. As far as just the mental health aspect of it, did you struggle with depression prior to that happening? I know it's kind of hard to say you were 16, 17, 18, 21, whatever, as far as whenever this happened, when you got your license on. But was that something that you ever struggled with, or is that something that really came about as a result of that?
No, I would say that was a totally new thing. It was being bombarded with, it was all the loss at that point.
Mm,
It was like I said, friends, career, uh just all of it. I was had everything on the horizon, the just the I love flying. That was what I loved to do. It was the friends, it was the sports. I love sports, intramural sports in college, all of it. And then all of a sudden, in a matter of minutes, I'm reduced to having to learn to walk again, and the loss of my arm and the loss of my career, and it was just, our brains aren't fully formed at that point. I was only
yeah.
19 years old, and that was it felt like too much to take.
Yeah. And little did you know that that was a huge loss, but you're going to experience an even greater loss in 2018, the loss of your daughter, Eva. I want to fast forward to Eva and her passing. How old was Eva whenever she passed, and what did she succumb to?
Eva was 5.5 years old when she passed away, and she passed away from a condition called polymicrogyria, and that's where the she was born with her brain being a little bit deformed, which gave rise to seizures.
Mm,
And we dealt with through her lifetime, we dealt with thousands of seizures, and as a parent, your kids are the closest thing to your heart,
yeah.
that anything can get, and so everything I'd gone through, everything I was going through at that point, I mean, I've said before, it felt like little league compared to watching that happen, and then having a kid daughter, as you know, Greg, pass away.
So, for our listeners that don't know me, my son David Michael Jacobs passed away December 23rd of 2020 while serving in the Army out at Fort Carson, Colorado, from an auto accident. And that's been my journey over the last 5 years. And I got to know Brett probably 4.5 years ago, and we just became closer than brothers on this journey just because of the loss and how it brought us together. So I wanted to have Brett on because there was a whole aspect of the loss that he experienced from the plane crash, compounded by the fact that he had lost his daughter. Um, I do want to drill down on the mental health aspect because I think it is very apropos for today's day and age. There's a lot of people struggling. I also have had suicidal thoughts. I also have struggled with depression. And I think that in America, I think in the past, there's been this taboo aspect to that conversation that we just don't like having openly. And we feel like something's wrong with us if we do have it openly. And I'm here to say that there's nothing wrong with you. There is, mental health aspects out there. There's dark, dreary days. And sometimes people experience dark, dreary days, even when it's bright and sunny and 85 degrees outside. So it's not conditional upon our environment. It can be conditional upon what we're just going through, and the trauma that's thrown at you, compounded by other trauma, which is really what you experienced, trauma on top of trauma. I don't know that I would say it was unresolved trauma on the plane crash before Eva hit, but it could have been. I'm obviously no
I would say
therapist, but
definitely.
yeah. So I want to fast forward here in just a little bit to you going back to Mexico on the 21-year anniversary, but Before that, just kind of tell me where you were at with 2018 on hitting after Eva passed, and you had the trauma of the plane crash, and then you had the trauma of your daughter. You had mentioned that you were suicidal. What did that look like for you, and how did you kind of overcome those thoughts?
Um, so honestly, it had been already like quite a few years. It had been, let's see, it had been 10 years past the accident when Eva was born. So some aspects of life were kind of getting back to normal. And then I kind of felt through the care of her and all of that, it felt like, you know, as any parent would do it, you kind of take a back seat to your kids.
Hmm.
And so I feel like all of my issues kind of just got deferred through that, and like I said, any parent would do that for their
Right.
kid. And
Yeah,
I
kind of put on hold, the pause button hit and hit at
absolutely,
that point. Yeah.
absolutely. So then leading on to, you know, post her passing away, everything for me just it felt like it just kind of stopped. And it, as you know, Greg, that when that happens, there's nothing that can prepare you for something like that. And so, once again, I found myself at a really, really low point. And we were, just 2 years or so past her death. And I believe that is when we got our paths crossed.
Yeah.
Is that the right timeline?
I think it is. Yeah. Just a little past that, maybe
Anyway,
2.5 years.
yeah, and I would say that is the single biggest factor that has helped me in my mental health, is having a community, or people that understand. Because you can be 100% alone in a giant crowd of people when you're facing something like that,
Yeah. Boy, isn't that
because
true?
because people don't, you know they have the best intentions, but they don't understand
Yeah. So,
unless you've gone through that. So this, Greg, if you want to share about
no, no,
the
no. Go ahead.
group of guys that you've started, that has been completely life-saving for me. And I would speak to that or be a proponent of that. I would say that to anyone. That has been so huge for me, for my life. Um, Even my family has reaped the benefits of that, of being able to recover in having that community.
Yeah. So you mentioned community right off the bat, and I knew what you were referring to. But for Brett, his community turned out to be my community. It was the same thing. I formed a group called Your Dad Forever. There was a guy in our group who lost his only child, and I remember saying to him that he'll always be a dad because the question came up, am I still a dad if I lost my only child? Not to be self-seeking here, but you can find out more kind of about us and what we do at yourdadforever.com. But it was basically about, 6 or 7, guys locally in Shelbyville, Kentucky area where we live, where we got together and we started going out and just doing different things from disc golf to bowling to just going out to dinner. And all the conversations were organic and nothing was off the table. And we would talk about suicide. I would ask about mental health every time that we would get together. We would just, if it happened to be, a week or two after Father's Day, we'd be like, "So, how was your Father's Day?" "Well, it sucked." "Okay, well, expand on that." And sometimes it was a matter of, well, I just had to get away from everybody, or I just had to skip church that day, or whatever it was. And we all just kind of learned from each other, I think, and we continue to. It's a real organic conversation that just morphs into whatever it does. There's nothing planned. There's no workbook we're going through or anything like that. So I think to Brett's point, I feel the exact same way. Once I started having and forming that community, there was empathy, and empathy is a gift. It's sympathy is nice, but empathy is a gift. Sympathy is something like, my gosh, Brett, I feel so sorry for you if I haven't lost a child. But if I have lost a child, then it's like, I get it. I get it. So
I,
this
I,
podcast obviously is not about just grief, but it's really, this is part of your journey of what you've gone through with the grief of losing the use of your limb and then losing Eva. Go ahead.
yeah, no, just with, for anybody, once you get in a group of community of people that have gone through what you've gone through, I felt like with the grief, it was, whereas I'm alone in a crowded room before, whereas with these guys, like I didn't even have to explain myself
Hmm.
with all the things I was feeling because they all already knew, and
Yeah.
you could just look at them and tell they already knew.
So I want to call this out. The first time that we started doing different events, one of the dads in our group, he built a disc golf course in honor of his son Ryan. And I remember us going out there and doing disc golf. And I beforehand, I remember reaching out to you and saying, "Oh, Brett, I am so sorry. That was so insensitive of me. I didn't think about the fact that you don't have the use of one arm." And you're like, "Oh, it's fine. It's not a problem." And we get out there, and there was like five or six of us, other guys than you, and we're all throwing these discs into the trees, down in the creek, in the high grass, and you're going like straight down the fairway, and it's just soaring, and we're all looking at each other like, what in the world is going on right now? And I quickly realized for disc golf that that's not a handicap for you, and that's not,
No,
the lack of use of an
no.
arm is not holding you back. So then the next month we went out, and somebody said, "Well, let's go bowling." So I said, "Oh, that's great. Let's go bowling." We lined it up, and before we were heading out, I thought, "Oh my gosh, I wonder if Brett can bowl without the use." And he gets out there, and we're all bowling like 60s, and Brett is bowling like 190. And we're looking at each other, and we are just like giving him the hardest time. We're like, "Buddy, there is nothing that we're ever going to come back to you and say, 'Oh, I'm so sorry. Are you able to do this?' Because you have learned how to overcome something. It is not a handicap for you. It is a matter of life going forward. And it's not to diminish the word handicap. It's not to diminish the aspect of there are a lot of handicapped people out there. All I'm saying is for you in your journey, for Brett Hartman, it has not, at least the way I view it, you might view it totally different, correct me if I'm wrong, but it has not been a handicap that you have allowed to cripple you, to make an excuse. You have said basically through your actions of, okay, life goes on. I have to figure out how to make a living, do this or that. Folks, he painted my whole house, and it's the most pristine paint job, that you've ever seen. He's got, workers that work for him, but it doesn't hold him back. So, talk to me a little bit just about that, as far as what that looks like for you.
So I will say I do want to give credit where credit is due. I'm a Christian, and I do point to God for help in that. In the beginning, it was a matter of every day would be I would pray for God, please let me do what I have to do today, and then you know our ability to adapt is pretty incredible, and it also helps that I'm 22 years past it now. But from the very beginning, I had to have, this is awkward, but I had to have somebody help me use the bathroom
Yeah.
as a 19-year old boy or man, whatever, and so that has been a learning thing. It has been a practicing thing. If I were to say that there wasn't frustration, that would be a complete lie. There have
Mm.
been times when I wanted to punch holes in the walls and crying and all that kind of thing through the years. But once again, our ability to adapt is amazing. And so from the bathroom experience before all the way up to now I can do sports, I can drive, I can tie shoes, I can do most everything I need to with one hand. I once again, credit where credit is due. My family does help me out a lot, and for that I'm very grateful. But
No, I think
yeah,
that's a great
it's
call
been a
out.
long process.
Yeah, it's necessary and worth noting that it's not where you're at right now. It was the whole journey. It was a whole process. It's kind of like people make comments to me. They're like, "How are you not crying when you talk about your dead son?" And I'm like, "Well, you haven't seen me sucking carpet fibers on the floor of my bedroom, just weeping my eyes out, or falling in the shower, just screaming." Things that happen behind closed doors, things that occur over a span of time, and I would venture to say that's also the growth didn't just happen. You had to go
Right.
through relearning a lot of things, and that's so important to call out. So, Brett, I wanted to steer you in a little different direction. When it came to the 21-year anniversary, you had mentioned to me over coffee one time, you're like, Greg, I think I'm going to go back out to New Mexico. I want to see the site where the crash was. So, talk to me about that, because that was about, what, a year and a half ago, I guess, something like that.
So yeah, a little more than that, almost 2 years, I think.
Okay.
And it was the 20th anniversary. I think you said
20th.
21, but
Yep.
it was 20th anniversary, and that was something that had been kind of brewing in my mind, something that I wanted to do. And so I called I called the fire department out there in Cloudcroft, New Mexico, and got in touch with the fire chief out in that area. And we were talking on the phone and everything, and he said, "Wait, what kind of a crash were you in again?" And I said, "A plane crash." And he said, you're kidding me." He checked some stuff and he said, "Brett, I was there."
Wow.
He said, "I was there," and I thought, "What in the world?" So anyway, through talking, he got me in contact with another first responder that was there that day, and my wife and I flew out on the 20th anniversary, and they guys that were there in 2003 took us out to the plane crash, and I got to see everything for the first time because I obviously couldn't remember anything, but just being there, it was really surreal.
Yeah.
All the feelings came back.
Did they
All the 20 years,
just flooded back?
the hardship, the everything. I can't describe that feeling.
Well, and it was the first time that you saw it because obviously you were unconscious and when they were pulling you out and for the next couple of weeks. And, so it was the first time you had actually laid eyes on that, piece of land. But I mean, the actual happenstance of you calling the fire department, trying to find somebody that might be able to take you to that scene. I mean, obviously it would have been different if it was an auto accident, because I'm sure there's been a blue million of those that have happened in the last 20 years. Plane accidents, not as much, but talk about, divine providence and, really God lining that up. I mean,
Absolutely.
that doesn't just, happen. That's not just a quirky, coincidence, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I just the way that it all worked out, the way that it all got set up, and I was I don't know. I was I can't really describe that feeling. It was almost too much to take, honestly.
Yeah.
Just based on the last 20 years at that point.
Yeah. So, I there's a lot of terminologies out there. People could say, facing your demons, or and I don't mean literal demons with that, but confronting your fears is probably the better terminology with that. Really confronting your emotions, confronting your fears. You didn't have to go back to New Mexico. That was something you felt prompted to do. I think that there's been a lot of healing that's come out of that for you. Closure, maybe
Absolutely.
healing. I don't know what terminology or words to put on it, but definitely hindsight 2020. What advice would you give people if they're looking at confronting something that has maybe held them back or has really caused them a lot of trauma, whatever that might be? What advice would you give them just to kind of push through that? It's uncharted waters, but just to do it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you're kind of saying it right there is, I mean, I guess with maybe a word of caution would be make sure that you give it all the time that you need. You know, you're not in a hurry. Everybody's on their own separate journey and everything. But if you feel like it's something that you can handle, by all means, confront it. Go back to it. Revisit it if if you feel like you can take it because I feel like that did so much for me in kind of I wanted to bring to close the hardship, which I'm still facing physical issues from it,
Sure.
but the mental journey had been the hardest for sure.
Yeah.
And so my hope with that was to kind of bring that to a close as best I could, and then the future is out there, and you work hard, you pray. But it was transformational for me.
And I think wisdom would tell you, Brett, that, by all means, listen to um, wisdom of people that share different things with you. Maybe people would say, "Hey, you need to do this. You need to do that." But at the same time, it really comes down to self-reflection. It comes down to what am I ready for? What am I not ready for? We're not trying to paint a rosy picture on this podcast by saying that, hey, everything is just going to be, rosy and fine. Everything's going to be
Correct.
resolved.
Correct.
You're not going to have any more pain anymore. You're still dealing with repercussions from the plane crash 22 years ago. You're still dealing with the loss of Eva in your life. There's always going to be traumatic events. We were talking about grief of a child, loss of a child. I look at it like the world literally stops spinning, but for some reason, everybody else keeps walking around you, and the movement doesn't stop for them; it does for you. That's initially. That's in the mourning phase when you're really just almost shocked. But I really do feel like there's this growth and transformation that has to come out of that. And for you, I really see that in your plane accident, definitely in your grief journey as well with your child, but the grief that came out of just a plane accident and going back to New Mexico. And I remember, texting you while you were out there, and I was just like so in tune, wanting to know how is it going, what's happening, and it was amazing. It's really challenged me. It really has, just to be able to confront different fears that I have in my life.
Yeah. Thanks, Greg. It was just I think the biggest thing has been the hurdles of my mind and getting over that whole thing. That has been the hardest thing without a doubt. And just to be out there, that coupled with friends like you and family and support of people has been huge for me, and for that I'll always be grateful.
Well, I appreciate it. I feel the same way. I think that just to kind of close us out here, mental health just doesn't instantly go away. I feel like staying on top of the community that we talked about and being involved, continuing to talk. Brett and I talk a lot, just like, sending text messages or, I'll just call him, he'll call me, and it's just a matter of like, hey, man, how's your day going? Being seen, is a huge thing because you can feel like, you're out there isolated and, you're an island unto yourself amongst other people. So, Brett, I thank you so much for coming on. If you live in the Shelbyville, Kentucky area and you are looking for a painter, what is the name of your website and your work phone number that people can call you?
Yeah, it is hartmanrestorations.com.
Good deal.
And I can be reached at 502-667-2517.
Nice.
Hartman Painting and Remodeling.
Very nice. Well, Brett, I can't thank you enough for coming on today. I so much just affirm your journey and just how you have overcome a lot of adversity in your life. The whole point of this podcast is ordinary men doing extraordinary things. And I know that we're our own worst critic. You might not look at yourself that way. You might look at yourself as ho hum, getting up every day and going to work and doing this or that. But I will tell you that there are people out there that notice, and I'm one of them. And I've been challenged to be a better man just through watching your life. So thank you so much. And folks, we appreciate you listening today.
Appreciate it, Greg. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to Ponderings and Musings of an Ordinary Man. I hope today's episode brought you a bit of inspiration. If you've enjoyed it, please remember to follow, like, or subscribe on your favorite platform so you never miss what's coming next. I can't wait to share future episodes with you. Until next time.